My name is Kenneth. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Kenneth.
And one of the reasons why I always do something before I start talking is because I've been nervous. And it shakes the nerves sometimes.
Okay.
But I made y'all think that I'm doing something. But I'm actually shaking the nerves. The nerves. Before we begin, I want to give credit and thanks to God for His amazing grace and His mercy, because I'm only clean and sober by God's grace and His mercy. I'm not stupid enough or dumb enough to think I'm sober on my own power. I'm not one of those. I want to give credit to the first 100 men and women who wrote the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous. They wrote and produced one of the greatest literary masterpieces of the 20th century. The doctor said, in his opinion, that the big book was written in masterly detail. Quote, he said he had a sense of real satisfaction when he was asked to contribute a few words on a subject which is already covered in masterly detail. Detail has not been looked up by the average individual to find out exactly what the doctor was talking about. Detail means the small elements that compose a magnificent whole. In other words, it's the small words that I think I know the meaning of that I've been missing. I want to give credit to my sponsor, who freely transmitted to me what was freely given to him. I want to thank Jenny for inviting me out here, and I want to thank all you all for supporting me in my own recovery. Now, the flyer said that I had 14 years. That's incorrect. I have 11 years, and I will have 12 years Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, I'll have 12 years. I have to say that because I would love for you all to think that I actually have 14 years, because it sounds good. But the fact is, I have 11 years, and I will have 12 years Christmas Eve. I think that they gave me 14 years because of the nature of the topic. I think that they thought that nobody with 11 years could come up with a topic like this. So, that's what I'm thinking. And the second thing we want to do is eliminate controversy, because this topic can be very, very controversial. So what we want to do is eliminate any mental controversy that will take place in the minds while we present this topic. And before we do that, we're going to read something from the textbook and see what the first 100 themselves say about this matter. And it's on page 19. They say, "We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are from their very nature controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal." So the topic is exactly how were the principles borrowed from medicine and religion. That is the topic. How did they come up with these principles and extract them from medicine and religion and incorporate them into a book? The book whereby millions and millions of alcoholics with different social, divergent, religious backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, color backgrounds could come together and join in brotherly and harmonious love upon a single solution. How did they incorporate principles from religion and medicine and perform such a magnificent feat? That's the topic. And to start it off, I would love to say in 2 sentences how they did that. But it took years of going to big book study, years of going to 12 and 12, years of working with others, years of reading to finally see what these people were doing and how they did it. So I'm hoping that you all bear with me. To begin with, I'm going to start from reading the 12 and 12. What they say in the foreword of the 12 and 12, they say this: many people, non-alcoholic, report that as a result of the practice of AA's 12 steps, they have been able to meet other difficulties of life. They think that the 12 steps can mean more than sobriety for problem drinkers. They see in them a way to happy and effective living for many, alcoholic or not. This word can y'all see that? Many. That word has significant meaning. But I never thought to look that word up in a dictionary until I was confronted with a sponsor who told me that I had to look up certain words because even though the big book was written in English, it was speaking a language that was largely unfamiliar to me. So this word, many, means, according to the dictionary, a large but indefinite number, the great majority of people. These are non-alcoholics who are reporting that as a result of implementing the 12 steps in their lives, they see in them a way for happy and effective living for many, alcoholic or not. That's one of the things they say. Now they say, on the bottom of the page, that the basic principles of AA as they are known today were borrowed mainly from the fields of religion and ethics. They were borrowed mainly from the fields, plural, of medicine and religion. Medicine, in this sense, means psychology, psychiatry, the study of human and emotional behavioral characteristics. This is the medicine that they are talking about that's applied to a sick-minded individual. The main problem that we have centers in the mind rather than in the body. Dr. Carl Jung said there was ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were driving forces in the lives of these people, suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives. All 5 of those were ideas, emotions, attitudes, conceptions. Is mental. All of it's mental. They were suddenly pushed to one side, and then the conceptions and motives took over. Now, the 12 and 12 also states, and this is to better help us understand where we're going at with this topic, that the effectiveness of the whole AA program is going to rest on how well and earnest we have come to a decision in step 3. So if that's the case, and the effectiveness of the entire Alcoholics Anonymous program rests on step 3, it would behoove us to have a better understanding of exactly what they were talking about when they say we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood it. So, I'm going to read from page 60 of the big book, where this is written at. And there's a lot of weight in here that's very significant to this topic. And it's coming from how it works. They said, being convinced, we were at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood it. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do? Just what do we do? Not what you think it means. What did they mean by that? They specifically state this. Just what do we mean by that, and what do we do? The first requirement, which is the first requirement in understanding what they meant and what they did, is that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. I'm looking for a mark. I'm losing my nerves, y'all. This word. Can y'all see that? Any life, not an alcoholic's life. Any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Any means one, some, or all, indiscriminately of whatever quantity, which has absolutely nothing to do with an alcoholic. He says, on that basis, we're always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Then they tell us, each person, not each alcoholic, each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show. Is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery. No. Yeah, and the rest of the players in his own way. Then they say most people, I missed that, most people try to live by self-proposal. Most is another word. This doesn't look right. Correct me when I'm wrong, y'all.
Wrong.
E-A-C-H. Okay, most people try to live by self-proposal. Most people, not most alcoholics. Most means the greatest in quantity, extent, or degree. Notice that all of these is dealing with quantity and numbers numerically stretched out. Right? All of them. He said, if his arrangements was only stay put, if only people would do as he wished. Notice this word is most significant. He. The average person will not look that word up in a dictionary because I think I already know what it means. Did y'all hear that? That word he, when used in this dictionary, when used in a generic sense, is used in a generic sense when the sex of a person is unspecified. It's compared to him, his, it, she, they. In the dictionary, it's compared to this word. Can y'all see that? Yeah. It. The name of this chapter is how it works. The average person never thinks how what works. What is this it that they're talking about? Bill defines it clearly. But the meaning, the definition of it has been lost through times because words change their meanings over time. This word, it, when it says how it works, is used to describe the self-centered, egocentric person. The self-centered part of a person is the it, how it works. That's what this chapter is really all about. He says, and this word he said, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. what usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes, on the next occasion, still more demanding of gracious, as the case may be. Still the plague does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker, even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of his life, out of his world, if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. And in order to understand the dictionary definition of it, you have to get a dictionary that depicts that definition then-a-days. Bill put it just like that, as people like to call it nowadays, the self-centered, egocentric. How it works is talking about how the self-centered individual works when he's running the show and operating on self-will as opposed to operating on God's will. Bill is still telling us what he meant, what they meant, and what they did by step 3, making my mind to turn the decision over to the care of God. He is like a retired businessman who rose in the Florida sunshine in the winter. They're going to give me 5 descriptions now of what he is like. The word he was mentioned on that page 17 times. This book is not accidentally written. It's written with purpose. Like the doctor said, it's written in masterly detail. He's like the man who rose in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. And the alcoholic who has lost all in his locked up. Now he includes the alcoholic. Is this helping?
Yes.
Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentment, or our self-pity? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows, and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find, the word find means to come upon after a search. So they invariably, without variation, always found that at some time in the class, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be heard. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. Everybody else is also an example of self-will, but the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. He doesn't think so because it's at the root. You can see the tree, but you can't see the root. You have to find and search in order to that conclusion. And that's what they did. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness, not them. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. Bill is still explaining what he meant and what they did by step 3. Then he says this. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. They tell us how it doesn't work and how it works. So in understanding the meaning of these words and studying this closely, because it's a textbook, it's worthy of study. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most of the ideas are simple, and this concept was the concept of the keystone of the new and triumphant arch in which we pass to freedom. It's the keystone. It locks in all other steps. It locks in the psychology and the religious aspect of it. In the principle, both of them. Step 3 holds the weight of the whole program. So now, we deal with the psychological aspect of the principles. Principles are rules and laws. Basic, fundamental rules and laws. We're talking about the rules and the laws that govern human and emotional behavioral characteristics on the basis of self-will. I'm always in collision with something or somebody, alcoholic or not. I don't know if any of you ever seen people that's so-called normal and say to yourself, well, at least I have a program. They don't. So, in understanding how they borrow principles, because William James, there's the big book, only mentions one other book by name. It mentions no other. And that's the varieties of religious, the varieties of religious what?
Experiences.
Say it again? Experiences by William James. That's the only book, the big book, that's not accidental. But if you ever get that book and you open up that book, you will find out what the real name of that book is. Once you open that book up, it's a study in human nature. Bill kept that book with him everywhere he went. You know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a picture floating around with 3 people in a room, a hospital room, with Bill and Bob sitting in a chair and a sick man sitting on the bed. Y'all ever heard that picture? Saw that picture? Well, it's all over Alcoholics Anonymous. But Bill is sitting there with a book in his hand. And nobody thinks, we talk about details, remember? Nobody thinks to ask, what book is that Bill has in his hand? See, Bill was not a Bible thumb. And the big book hadn't been written yet. So what was that book? Y'all ever saw the picture? Yeah. I remember being in my mother's house a long time ago, and my mother had a picture of Christ sitting at a dinner table or a supper table with 12 of his friends. My mother would never cuss in front of that picture. She cussed everywhere else, but she would never cuss in front of that picture. I looked at this picture for years, and nobody could tell me what's on the plate. We talk about the details that make up a magnificent whole. Y'all, I miss the details. So I miss the beauty that's in the big book because I'm not looking up the small, what I think is so small that is beneath my notice. This is where the meat and potatoes are at. These words that I wrote, many, most, he, is all psychologically connected to the average human being. Y'all heard? So they took the principles from psychology, William James, Dr. Silkworth, and Carl Jung, and a lot of others, and incorporated them into a program that we can take and use it practically without even thinking about it. Did y'all hear what I said? All right, we're talking about how they extracted the principles from psychology. That's roughly a good idea. We don't have adequate amount of time to present this in the form that it needs to be presented in. But we're talking about two different things. How they extracted religion and psychology. We've touched on the psychological aspect. But how did they borrow principles from religion? This is the part that calls for open-mindedness. The word religion, in its original meaning, I think I'm spelling it right, had nothing to do with dogma, doctrine, or belief system. The word religion, in its original sense, meant this. Wrong. Y'all see that? Yeah. Religion means a way of life. Haven't we been given a manner of living that demands rigorous honesty? Don't we have a design for living that works in rough going? We have a way of living that gets indescribably more wonderful as time passes. Don't we have that? Alcoholics Anonymous gave us the principle rather than the personalities. See, the average religion is crowded with personalities and wondrous, miraculous, unbelievable events by some. Y'all heard? So Bill, in the first 100, extracted the principles and removed the personalities. In other words, when you go back in religious history, basically any major religion, you're going to always find two opposing forces. You're going to find God and Satan. Cain and Abel. Ishmael and Isaac. Jacob and Esau. Moses and Pharaoh. Elijah and Ahab. Samson and Delilah. Jesus and the chief priests. Etc., etc., etc. Y'all familiar with that? Are you? Yes. You're going to always find two opposing forces. One of those forces is always representing God's will. And the other is always representing self-will. The book said, the textbook tells us that we being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what had defeated us. So all scripture was giving us physical descriptions of spiritual realities. Alcoholics Anonymous took the personality completely out of the equation and gave us the principles for which the personality stands. To give you a classic example, any of you all ever heard of Jonah and the whale? Jonah was ordered by God to go to Nineveh. Jonah took it upon himself to go in the opposite direction. And he landed in this big fish. Now, what good would it do me to know about what happened to him 4,000 years ago? Nothing. But if I remove the name and look at the principle of what happens to me when I do opposite of what God wants me to do, I wind up in places like this. In a whale truck, treatment centers, prisons, and whatnot, under bridges, and what. That if I'm looking, see, they remove the personality and gave us the principle for which the personality stands. That way I won't have to argue about whether or not the sea opened up 4,000 years ago. All I have to do is look at what happens to those who operate on self-will as opposed to what happened to those that's operating on God's will. Am I being clear with this? Yeah. All right, so they removed the principles from religion. I mean the personality from the religion and gave us the principles for which the personality stands. What does the 12th tradition tell us? Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to do what? Ever reminding us to place principles before personality. By coming into Alcoholics Anonymous and looking at the principles, I learned how to read my own scripture and understand it better. Y'all heard what I said? Yeah. So, look at the textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous itself. In the big book, God is the first one to practice anonymity. He has no name. There's no name given to him. Whatever a person chooses to believe as his higher power or his God is super fine. I had one guy that I was working with. When he got to the third step, he told me, he said, Kenneth, I don't believe in God. He said, what I do believe that there's 3 different types of angels that I said, well, that's what we're talking about. Whenever we say God, that's exactly what we mean. Whatever it means, they extracted the personality and gave us the principle for which the personality stands. And they presented it in a form where I didn't have to wonder about the beatitudes and the begots. I didn't have to wonder about any of all of that. I didn't have to worry about it if I didn't believe what would they say. They gave me a practical program of action that produced results. Even in, I don't know if any of you all read scriptures, but I used to read a lot of scriptures. I read the Bible twice before I even went to school. And in the last part of that book, there's a chapter called the Acts of the Apostles. Y'all ever heard of that? It's not the knowledge of the apostles. It's the Acts of the Apostles. Y'all heard? Y'all look at, since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, I could look at what happened to Paul, Peter, James, how he went from Colossia, Corinthia, Ephesians, the Hebrews, the Rome. Y'all remember these things? Do you? Yeah. Well, how does that affect me, principally wise? When I go to Citywide, to Spring Branch, to Delta Club, to the Men's Center, I'm principally doing the same thing, going to different places, carrying the message. Is that right or wrong? So it's the Acts of the Apostles. This thing is based upon what I do, not what I believe. Y'all heard? So they gave me a way to act myself into a new way of thinking. This is the magnificence of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's exactly what they did. Now, the medical view on Alcoholics Anonymous. What did they say? These are people who were not alcoholics, who looked at what Alcoholics Anonymous was doing, and this is what they said. In the medical view, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is one of the statements by a guy named Dr. Foster Kennedy. He was a neurologist. Is a neurologist a person that deals with the brain? Yeah. Is that correct? Yes. He deals with the brain or the mind? With the mind, right? He said the organization, this is what he says about us. The organization, about them. Well, I'm one of them now. He said, this organization of Alcoholics Anonymous calls on 2 of the greatest reservoirs of power known to man. Religion and that instinct for association with one's fellows, the herd instinct. He said, I think our profession must take appreciative cognizance of this great therapeutic weapon. If we do not do so, we shall stand convicted of emotional sterility and of having lost the faith that moves mountains, without which medicine can do little. This is what he said, a great neurologist said about Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, the religious view on Alcoholics Anonymous says this. One statement from the Episcopal magazine, The Living Church, observes editorially, the basis of the technique of Alcoholics Anonymous is the truly Christian principle that a man cannot help himself except by helping others. Notice what he said. The truly Christian principle, not the truly Christian doctrine. Y'all heard? Because Bill himself disagreed with the tenets of the Oxford group. That's why he changed Alcoholics Anonymous from 6 steps to 12 steps. Bill's sponsor came to him and visited him. And Bill asked and said, "What's the God did to you, Evan?" And Evan said, "Religion. I got religion." And Bill saw his own sponsor relapse with religion. Y'all heard? So he changed the whole concept of it. Evan was trying to practice absolute purity, absolute honesty, absolute this, absolute, and relapse. Bill said, "The heck with that. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles." So he changed. And he gave us a workable way. And told us, even if you stumble, don't worry about it. And we told him. But he saw his own sponsor relapse with that. So I'm really, really thankful. I'm tremendously grateful that he did that. And I'm glad my sponsor just gave me a way that works. Now, there's the Lasker Award. Alcoholics Anonymous was given the Lasker Award, which is an award that was given to living people. And they tried to present this award to Bill himself. But Bill refused it. And Bill said it should be presented to Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous, in turn, rejected the $1,000 that came with it. $1,000 was a lot of money back then. And Alcoholics Anonymous rejected the $1,000 that came with it. But this is what they said in the Lasker Award. Historians may one day recognize Alcoholics Anonymous to have been a great venture in social pioneering, which forged a new instrument for social action, a new therapy based on the kinship of common suffering, one having a vast potential for the myriad other ills of mankind. MYRIAD. The myriad other ills of mankind. Y'all know what the word myriad means? No. Other than 10,000. Other than 10,000, it means a vast, great, multitudinous number. That's exactly what it means. Every word that I put up here is dealing with numbers that stretches past, uncountable numbers. And that's the form of this book that they wrote it in. Alcoholics Anonymous, like they said in the 12 and 12. In the 12 and 12 was mentioned many people, non-alcoholic, report that as a result of utilizing the 12 steps, they have found a magnificent way of living that can mean much, not only to just alcoholics, but uncounted people. Have not the 12 steps been used for Sex Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, bulimic anonymous, overeaters anonymous, any kind of illness, the myriad other ills of mankind. This is not a prophecy, but this is an actual fact that has proven true. Because Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps, is the father of them all. So the principles were borrowed mainly from the fields of religion and medicine. I went to a treatment, not a treatment center, a meeting. I presented this topic, not in the detail that I'm going in here, but I presented the topic, and one of the sarcastically inclined skeptics said, well, if they were borrowed, that means I would have to give them back. And I told him that's absolutely correct. So once we utilize the borrowed principles, then when we go back to our church, mosque, or synagogue, or whatever congregation we go to, we're going not to get help. We're going to be a bright spot in that congregation, helping many of the struggling priests. I'm looking for the preacher, and the priest that's suffering from alcoholism. So when I go up there, yeah, I'm giving it back. Y'all understand what I'm saying? I'm giving it back because I'm coming back from here to help that struggling addict or alcoholic, and that's how I give it back. And whenever Kenny steps up here, it's time for me to step